Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Divine Soul Awakenings this week. Today's topic, we'll be talking about altered states of consciousness. So there are many, many different ways to achieve altered states of consciousness. Most commonly, people will utilize different psychedelic or psychoactive drugs, but I promise you that is not the only way, and that's definitely not the safest way to achieve these altered states of consciousness. So today we'll share a little bit of our own experience. I have multiple experience in many different ways of achieving altered states of consciousness. We will also analyze the experiences of altered consciousness that you may have had, and also how do you talk to somebody who's maybe been through one of these experiences and is having a little bit of a hard time integrating this new concepts or these new ways of being into their life. So we all slip in and out of altered states of consciousness every single day, every single minute. You know, every one of us has been so caught up in paying attention to the television or on our tablet or on our phone. That is actually deemed an altered state of consciousness because we've just shifted our awareness from what's actually happening around us and focused it in onto one simple thing. What's really amazing about these altered states of consciousness is they can be quite ecstatic and quite blissful, especially when we have these very deep sort of spiritual connection moments through these altered states of consciousness. But we could also have the opposite happen. There could be a lot of tension, a lot of stress. A lot of people will utilize different techniques to achieve altered states of consciousness to help with things like PTSD and anxiety. But sometimes, especially when it is when we're utilizing psychoactive drugs to induce these states of consciousness, sometimes they can actually increase or create states of PTSD or anxiety. So that's why we really just have to be sort of consciously aware if we are utilizing any type of substance to shift our awareness. So I would just kind of like to open it up here before I dive any deeper here and just see what are your guys' opinions on altered states of consciousness? Do you have any experience with it? And we'll start down there in the bottom corner there with Doc.
I guess the sort of the one that's most, I would say obvious, but most profound for me is when I'm meditating or when I'm going for a walk and you sort of zone out and you go somewhere else. And as a musician, it happens very often, particularly when you're playing with somebody a musical piece and you don't even look at the music, you just are aware of this relationship with somebody else and you just nod and it just works beautifully. And probably the classic one where I get taken out of my altered state of consciousness when my wife says, "Have you heard what I said, dear?" And then it just goes out the window. So it just vanishes then. But that's another story.
Well, yeah, and you brought up a good point there about just sort of being so focused on whatever the activity it is that you're engaged with. So many of you have probably heard the term of like being in the zone. And it's commonly referred to in sports, but we can step in and out of that zone at any point when we are actively engaged fully with what we are doing. So I'll just kind of expand a little bit on that concept of being in the zone. So what is happening when we actually enter into the zone? We've gone through the process of learning all the intellectual information that we need so that how to achieve and how to do whatever activity it is you're doing. But we've learned it to the point where our intuitive brain can then kick in. And we don't have to think about the process. Our body just naturally goes into that experience. So I'm sure many of you have experienced moments where you're just so engaged in doing some type of activity and you think, oh, that was a good 20 minutes, but then you look up at the clock and it's been like 3 hours have gone by. So when we are in the zone, that is a very healthy state of consciousness that we enter into. And it's almost like the information and the task just filters through us and we just become the machine for the task to come to life. So I know myself, I enter in and out of the zone quite frequently every day, especially when I am doing sessions with my clients.
I have to say, as somebody who plays music a lot, there's a particular point when you're playing a piece where there is no instrument, there is no you. It's just your consciousness and what's coming out from the instrument and what you're hearing. And I guess with Western classical music, you got to read something and then you translate it and then you play it. Whereas with other forms of music, classical or jazz or whatever, it just literally flows. And those of us who are fortunate enough to experience that know that it's a very beautiful moment when you're able to do that as such.
And that could be anything, whether it's painting, music. I know I see Hushna on here, who's an amazing painter. And you can tell when you're looking at Hushna's paintings on Instagram or wherever she shares them, you can tell that she is lost in it as well. There's an energy that comes from it as well that's overwhelming. And I think we've all experienced that at one point or another, whether we've defined it as an unconscious state or not. I think as we get to know and recognize these states, we can utilize it even better to expand our consciousness and awareness and put intention behind it instead of just getting lost in something, having intention as you do it as well, which is something I experience quite a bit in my, not only my meditations, but when I'm doing breath work, the humming work, when I'm giving meditations, there's a feeling of being lost, but especially I noticed it greatly when I set an intention. And that's really big when I do humming every morning, and I'll hum and I'll create those vibrations with the intentions of activating all of my cells, the intention of waking everything up and unifying my cells and developing a relationship with them. So I'll hum for at least 5 minutes before I do my breath work with that intention set. So I think that's the difference of having an altered state of consciousness, of instead of just drifting off and daydreaming, but having an intention with it, that time flies by with a specific purpose of creation or anything that might be. For me, that's the definition.
I like it.
I don't know about you guys. Let us know in the comments if you guys are experiencing this as well, because I think we all experience it. Like Hushna said, she experienced it with her paintings, and I think we all experience it in different ways. So let us know in the comments what you are experiencing.
Well, what I find really interesting, and I don't know if you've practiced this yet, Con, but if you do that humming practice every morning and you know what it feels like when you're doing that humming practice and how it sort of energizes and awakens your body, you can actually pull in that state of being at any point during your day without actually having to do the humming. Once you've done it enough and you know what it feels like, you can just embody that sensation and that feeling whenever you're feeling tired or exhausted. It's
and I agree with you.
All the time.
Yeah, I agree with you. As you, like all of this work that we're doing, all the aspects of it, as you put your intention into it, and as you make it part of your practice, it's not only becomes something that you do every day, it just becomes something that you are. So that I'm constantly feeling the vibrations within my cells. I can feel the oxygen in the blood moving through my veins. I can feel every cell of my body to a point that I actually feel the cells around my body. But that's part of my practice and my awareness. As I do all of my movements, whether it's humming, breathing, meditating, even a walking meditation, there's an awareness, and that's part of the foundational work that we're doing in expanding our consciousness, is becoming more aware. And again, this is just one more tool and aspect to be aware and to be continually aware of ourselves and who we really are, which isn't these bodies. It's actually the energy that envelops this body and the space around it. And that's just part of this practice of developing awareness. And that's why I love about altered states of consciousness and why it's important. And you can almost put it's a label, but it's not necessarily. It's just something that we all do as being part of this practice.
Mm-hmm.
What struck me is that, and again, I'm just trying to generalize things, and it's like sometimes we can get into these states when we're on our own. Sometimes it's within a group, like for example, people singing in a choir, or when we're doing a particular activity, like I don't know about the ladies, Jenny with Mr. Tucker and Rachel with your horses. When you're grooming your animal, is that you get a connection there, isn't it? Do you find that also helps put you into that space?
Absolutely. Yeah. Just spending time with him, it gets like Mike was talking about, being in that zone, having that energy of an animal with you, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And horses are very good at that. They're very adept at being in that space. So one of my favorite things to do with my horse, I don't ride as much as I used to. I really don't ride much at all. She's older now and she's sort of more happy being just retired. But I just got to the point with my horse where I just enjoy being in this space with her and not needing anything from her other than just to be there with her. So what I'll do is I'll just sit in her stall or wherever, even sometimes it's a large arena, she's totally loose, and I'll just sit there and I'll just start breathing and relaxing and meditating in my own way, and she'll just come closer to where her actual face is touching my face, and we're breathing together in that space and just sharing that moment together. And it's just magical because they're so tuned to your vibration and calming, and just being in their presence too.
I just got a really weird image, and this could lead us into the next area of this, that when you're sitting in the stall, isn't there like methane gas coming from the horses?
No,
that might have a psychoactive effect. I'm sorry.
I love the smell of manure, I'll tell you. I grew up smelling manure, and it doesn't, it's not the manure that bothers me, it's the other, but smell that can be strong. But I don't need to get into that. But literally, no, I wouldn't be doing it in a space where I would have to clean the stall. In that case, I think if it was bothering me. But they're very clean animals. Horses are still. They eat grass. That's all they eat. So yeah.
I think it's cows that sort out the methane. I get this moment with one of my dogs where she looks longingly in my eyes. Usually of an evening, she'll put a chin on my lap and then look at me, and I just gaze into her eyes, and then my wife says, "You never look at me like that." That's another story. Oh, then I'm in trouble. Anyway, over to you, Mike.
All right, I wanted to put this back up here. So Michelle, what I kind of see here is no different than when we see Buddhist monks repeating mantras and stuff like that. And they're repeating those same mantras over and over and over to elicit those altered states of consciousness. So essentially that could be the case of what you're experiencing when you are repetitively humming the tune over and over. It can elicit those altered states of consciousness and altered states of awareness.
Could it be that you're also come?
Because we're talking about humming, what I wanted to add in, that the science and the research that they've done with it is that if you do it for 5 minutes is all you need. But if you do it for 5 minutes sustained, you will actually have a huge amounts of benefits that involved with the cellular level, the lymphatic system, of clearing, of creation, opening up your third eye, your pituitary glands, and your pineal gland. Like everything just kind of opens up, and it clears out a lot of systems and a lot of healing, releasing nitric oxide, which is healing as well in the body, reducing inflammation. There's huge amounts of benefits to humming, but they found that you need a minimum of 5 minutes. So when you do that, Michelle, think about doing it for at least 5 minutes, and if you, even better, put an intention behind it. as you feel that humming. And when you do the humming, notice the vibrations forming in your belly and also in your nasal passages as well. And when you have the two areas sustaining your body, you'll have a greater effect throughout the entire body of whether it's humming, mantras. And the reason why I'm saying humming, when you think about the mantra of Om, it's at the end of Om, you have that So it's really simple to do a hum. And as long as you can breathe, you're able to do a hum. So that's why I brought that up. So sorry, Doc, you were saying?
No, it's actually very, very relevant. Not actually, it always is relevant. I think what seems to me that if you repeat this is that you're sort of creating, I don't know what the word is, frequently used pathways or memories or experiences that allow you to tap into that, as was mentioned earlier on. And I can think of, having played in many orchestras, it was always amazing when you'd sit next to the cello section, because the sound just vibrates and you can feel it going through you. It's a bit like standing in front of a bass speaker at a concert where you can feel it going through you. And depending on our physiques and our bodies and what we like, there might be those resonances and those frequencies, either music or otherwise, that zap through you and if you like, open up those pathways as we were talking about earlier on.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because unlike, there's a lot of sound therapies that you have, even infrared, which kind of comes from the outside in. But when you're generating the sound from within your body, that you are actually creating the vibrations within. So you're actually reaching areas that the external systems can't really reach as effectively. And you even think about if you've ever been in your senior's home or anywhere where someone is in healing, they're in healing. A lot of seniors, they end up humming, and they moan quite a bit. And that moaning is something that happens automatically from our bodies to stimulate healing and vibrations. You can see that vibration it's all about increasing your vibrations, whether you do it with your emotions or you're using a sound and you're using a speaker, using the drums. There's so many different ways of doing that. And Mike, you do that a lot with your didgeridoo. Do you notice the effects when you're using the didgeridoo that it's forming from within you?
Very much. And it's especially because when I do play the didgeridoo, it's not just my mouth that's making the noise, it's my whole body. So I'm engaging my diaphragm and my abdomen and my throat, and anything I can get to shake and rattle in different ways produces the different noises. I don't necessarily hear what everyone else hears coming out the end of the didgeridoo, because I'm a couple feet away from the end of it, but I feel it all moving through my body as it's playing. And what we also have to understand here is that our voice is actually the most powerful sound healing instrument we have available to us. And so the more that we can actually utilize either singing or humming or just making any type of vocalization, even speaking, is a great, powerful tool that we have within us. And I find when I'm in the middle of doing sessions with people that occasionally I'll start to hum, or I'll start making different kind of noises through my vocal cords as part of that release for the person. It's not like I'm consciously doing it. I'm just in that space and that sound like a where something needs to come out as a way to help that energy move and release.
Yeah, I have that same experience too, Mike, when I'm working with clients. And I noticed lately that that's been something new that's been coming in, some humming during the healings. And at first I was thinking, well, this is going to distract them, but I just let it come. And one of the other things that we're talking about in vibrational sound healing is working with singing bowls. I also work with singing bowls. I know you do too, Mike. And I also have a friend of mine who does singing bowl sessions, and I do healing sessions with him. And that definitely puts me into an altered state of consciousness. That's huge for me. And I know my clients are connecting with the singing bowls too during their sections.
Yeah, I have one of my friends who helps me when I do teach classes. And for the first couple classes he came to, he was hesitant to vocalize. And I kept bugging him and just say, like, be vulnerable, relax, let it come through. And the moment he would just start, and it was like a light language that was coming through, all of a sudden the whole energy in the room would shift, and people would start having different types of reactions because he started to vocalize the energy coming through him. And it took a couple times of him to be comfortable with it, but now he does it all the time because he realizes the benefit to him, but also how that can shift it for everybody else.
Well, that's a really good point what you're talking about in these groups, because I find when we are in group meditation, that we are creating these altered states of consciousness, that our meditations are so much more exponential in terms of energy and vibration of what you can feel. That and it feels that they're starting to document. I think it's they're using something called Sputnik that measures the energy of the room. So I know they were doing this with the Dr. Joe Dispenza sessions, and he'd have like 500,000 people in these groups. And at their week-long retreats, by the end of the week-long retreat, they finish it off with something like a walking meditation. But prior to that, they've been in the same arena, in the same space, doing group meditations together. So they all end up going into these altered states of consciousness. The brains end up going into the gamma vibrations, wavelengths, which is a really high state of gamma, which typically you see that with a lot of Buddhist monks or meditators for a long time. But what they discovered with this Sputnik was that when they left the arena and did this walking meditation, which might have been a few kilometers, miles away, that as they're now doing this walking meditation as a group, that the energy and the vibration in the arena where they spent the entire week, the energy increased there as well. That they were able to measure it with this tool called Sputnik. So it really goes to show you that when you're reaching these altered states of consciousness, and the vibrations that you're creating has a much more wider effect, that it doesn't have a limit of time and space. It goes beyond that.
That's what's known as quantum entanglement.
Yes.
So even with that concept of quantum entanglement, if you go and you give blood, of course, before you give blood, you have to fast for 8 to 12 hours. When you go and give blood and they send that blood to the lab, the first thing people do is they go and eat right away. But because of quantum entanglement, that blood that is in a vial in a lab actually changes its state based on the blood that's in your body at that moment. So if you go out and you eat something super sugary and they're testing your blood for blood sugar levels, your blood in the lab will have a huge spike in it because of that quantum entanglement.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
I love that. You guys love that. Leave a like about this, because that's blowing my mind right now. It's really cool. Because it reminds me of Lynn McTaggart's work. So she's an investigative journalist, and she studied intentions. And she's got some really good books out there and a lot of studies on this, where they started following things with a plant, and that did something similar, where they put electrodes onto a plant to measure the energy and frequency that it had. And when the scientist lit a match that was near it, he was going to light a cigarette or something, it ended up spiking as if it was going to be burned, as it recoiled a bit in energy. So it ended up leading him along this road of testing how energy and even plants can affect it. So he did this with a drive in his car, that in the back of the lab, he had a vial of his blood that he put testing electrodes on, and then he went on a trip. And during his trip, he was going through the airport, which was extremely stressful for him, to drive on the highway, to go in and out of traffic, to deal with the stresses that go along with it. And they measured the spikes that he was having in his body matched the stresses that was happening within the blood back at the lab. So that was really cool. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. They also did that with war vets that had diabetes, and they put them in a room, and after a big meal, they put them in one room and they had them watch comedies and happy shows, and they took the other half and put in another room to watch videos of the war that stressed them out. And the ones that had the happiness and the joy, raising their vibrations, raising their frequency, ended up not needing the insulin in order to curb the meal that they just had. But the ones that were in stressors, it spiked even more so than what they're going through. So it really seems that the intention and energy that you're having while you're in these altered states has a difference.
Could it be that going into these altered states enables connectivity and enables those connections as per your quantum entanglement? I mean, we have them all the time, I'm sure, but it either enables it or makes it more apparent, or actually makes it more obvious when that happens. What do you think?
Good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, didn't mean to stump you there. It's just a thought, yeah.
I was a little distracted.
Because
Say it again.
Yeah,
Well,
we're
maybe
just
as
that,
we enter into
trying
those,
to comprehend the question.
maybe as
Yeah.
we enter
I mean,
into
it's
those altered states of
Sure.
consciousness, it's what if we see it as it taking us back to our true nature, which is one with the divine. So it's actually altered states of consciousness are a way of maybe overriding the ego and life and trauma and stuff that happens in the very human 3D world, but is again taking us back to that connection and that singularity with the divine, and however that shows up for you.
And what I'm personally, what I'm experiencing, it's all about raising your vibrations.
Yeah.
And there's so many different ways of raising your vibrations that you might want to use. Some people are using psychedelics, using microdosing. That is raising your consciousness, but doing it in a safe environment and being guided through it. Some people are doing meditations. And if you think about microdosing, you can end up doing mushrooms by yourself and go through your experience, or you can be guided through it with a professional that knows the experience with it. You can also go through meditation through yourself and put yourself into silence, or you can have somebody guide you through a guided meditation. But once you actually begin to experience the sensations of hitting that divine guidance, the higher vibrations, the expanded consciousness, that is when you do it by yourself, your own experiences can expand, your own vibrations, that you end up going into those areas by yourself. So that when you start doing further guided events and being shown, hey, look at this. Oh, I didn't look at that before. Now you're seeing something new, you can experience it and be curious and play with it more, which really goes to the playfulness of creation.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Go on, Rachel.
I might lead this in a new direction. I don't know, but just my experience building off of what Khan's saying about meditation, my experience with altered states of consciousness, or my interest in that area in as a spiritual practice, is obviously channeling guidance from divine higher dimensional beings, and that requires you to obviously be in a receptive state and a somewhat altered state to receive that clearly. But meditation, I like the idea of the spiritual activations that come through when you do connect with these other energies, and you can begin to visualize through your meditation and sense and feel and perceive specific energies around you. You can call in elementals, you can call in spirit guides, you can call in ascended masters and archangels and beings like this, but or just tune your intuition to what feels right for you, and allow yourself to allow your own higher self to take you on a journey in these like inner worlds. And you can really raise your vibration that way. But I've had some really powerful experiences doing that, that I haven't had in any other circumstance. So one of the experiences I had doing that was through this powerful, I was just doing this meditation, and when my eyes opened, I think it was with the galactics or something, with some kind of healing energy, and I was really feeling into it. And then my eyes opened, it was a dark room, but my eyes opened and I could see sacred geometry just with my eyes open, not in my meditation, just with my eyes open, just all over my room. It was like living light, and it was just vibrating and pulsating, but it was in the form of sacred geometry. And then I had that experience again, and I want to add this into it, the conversation about dreams and in your dream state, and that being an altered state, but also the in-between dream state is when I tend to really feel that presence of my higher self and just my guides and what information is coming into me. And one morning I woke up from a dream and I had that same experience, only it was daylight. I literally opened my eyes and I see the circle of life, all like an overlay on my room with the same like colors moving in and out, and it was moving. It was like alive. And then I had a powerful activation with Master Jesus where I was meditating in my room, and it was it was like at night, and I was starting to fall asleep, but I was trying to merge with his energy consciously. And then I started to fall asleep. And then when I woke up and I opened my eyes, I literally saw his figure, the figure of Jesus, like above me. I was laying down and I saw his hands like this, and they were white, glowing energy coming off. But I was like, wow, this is intense. But so yeah, it's really cool. There's so many ways to do that, and whatever you feel guided to do for your own healing and growth process.
So what was probably happening for you there, Rachel, when you were seeing the geometric shapes and stuff, is our body naturally produces a chemical known as DMT, or dimethyltryptamine.
Yeah.
It is not, and it is, I don't think they fully proved this yet, but it is theorized that it's actually produced in the lungs. So through breath work that we utilize through meditation, it releases those natural psychoactive and psychedelic compounds in our body, again known as DMT or dimethyltryptamine. And it is also a substance you can take externally for a drug-induced state, but it does produce very intense geometric patterns and shapes.
Wow.
So you made a real good point. And what people need to understand, that if you want to have those experiences, yes, the quickest and easiest way to achieve that is through a psychedelic experience, which, in my past when I was younger, I had a slight addiction to psychedelics. But to be honest, I've had the most powerful experiences and hallucinations and trips just through breath work and actually being completely sober. So we do not need these substances, but if you are having a hard time sort of breaking through or coming to an awareness about specific traumas, psychedelics are a great tool we can use to do that. But like Khan said, if you have zero experience with psychedelics, it is so important that you find someone who has the knowledge and has the experience and can guide you safely through those experiences. I have seen people who have taken psychedelics and they weren't ready for it. And I knew a guy who ended up in the psych ward for 6 months because he just consciously couldn't handle the shift in his awareness that happened because of that experience. Thankfully he's okay now, but it was a scary place for him to be. So again, if you're going to look into using psychedelics, make sure you do find someone who is experienced and knowledgeable and who has guided other people through those experiences, so it is done safely and you can achieve what it is you are trying to achieve through those experiences.
So you're bringing up some really good points here about doing it safely, but we haven't really defined all the different methods that you can get into an altered state of consciousness. So we've talked about meditation, we've talked about sound vibrations with humming or using an instrument. We've talked about using drugs, but in the realm of drugs, and we're talking about safety, I guess now we're also talking about alcohol and maybe other weeds or even cocaine, or I haven't really done anything on the cocaine end, but I've had my experience with marijuana and weed and alcohol and a lot of psychedelic drugs. But is there anything more in that realm? Because I think that's the area that we know that people can get lost in, especially when we think about alcoholism and doing too much weed. So do we have a definition or the different types and where we can get lost in that?
Are you talking about psychedelics or just other?
Well, I think it's
because there are many different ways we can achieve altered states of consciousness. But
there's the two. So either we're doing it unconsciously. So when I was younger, we ended up just doing drugs, and we ended up drinking and doing alcohol. And now that we're maybe we've expanded our consciousness, we're a little bit more aware. We're doing it with a purpose. There's an intention behind it.
Yeah, very much.
So it seemed, but now you're talking about your friend that ended up doing it, and I have friends like that too. That happened when we were younger. That ended up taking it and just they were not themselves anymore. They were gone. So there's that slippery slope of just doing it without intention, without guidance, that we can get there. So I think it's helpful to address how to identify that when you have someone in your circle that's going down that realm, and what is in that definition, because we think this is an altered state. Well, if it is someone that's under drugs and alcohol, maybe there's something else. How do we address it, and how do we deal with it? So that's where I'm leaning towards.
Well, the big thing, and again, I'll keep it kind of wrapped up in the psychedelic experience or drug experience, but this goes the same for any type of breathing work you're doing or meditation. The biggest issue that people will have is when they start to resist or try to control the experience. And the moment we try to control, our body goes into a state of tension. And this is what, when you hear people having a bad trip, this is what's happening, is they aren't comfortable with where the experience is taking them. So then they try to stop it and control it and redirect it. And with a psychedelic experience, and which is why it's so important you have someone there to guide you safely, is when you start going into that resistance place, you need someone there to calm you down, to remind you to breathe, and to just relax and surrender into the experience. And as uncomfortable as that experience might be in the moment, that is where the real beauty and the real lessons and learning are going to come, is when you are sort of led through the darkness or through the graveyard at midnight, and you come out at the other side. Right? So it's needing that space to surrender, and having someone there, whether it's through drugs or meditation or any other type of experience you're going through, just to make sure that you are safe and that you are grounded and still connected in the physical body. So I personally have guided several people through their first psychedelic experiences, and for them, it was important that I establish a really good trust with them prior to even administering that experience for them. So they knew when they were in those altered states, their physical body was safe, looked after, and cared for, so they could move through those places of uncomfortableness safely.
I think too, Mike, one of the things, and correct me if I'm wrong, Con, what you're trying to touch upon too is somebody, the intention of the use of the alcohol, the drugs, or whatever, is this person trying to escape life, or are they looking for an experience to grow spiritually, or in a situation like that? That's where the difference can come in, as far as, somebody saying, well, I'm going to drink to get to this point. Well, really, are they trying to run away? Are they trying to escape, or self-medicate? There's a difference there.
Yeah, but I think the underlying emotion that happens, it's the same. So if you end up using a psychedelic, or you end up going into a deep meditation and you see something that you resist. So Mike talks about resistance, which I think is key here. Our resistance can be experienced either when we're drinking, whether we're doing drugs, whether in meditation, whether we're doing something that we've experienced that is something new that we haven't seen before. Now, that resistance is typically going to be at a biological, body level initially, that there is fear that stops up and says, this is something new. I don't know what it is. And that could be even apprehensive of getting onto a roller coaster. There's that fear. But depending on what enhancers you have in your system, that especially if it's something like a psychedelic, that which moves you into a higher vibrational state, your brain, that you're actually forcing the brain to go somewhere that you don't want. It's like being dragged onto the roller coaster. You're being forced onto the roller coaster when you're just not ready, where you might need some time. Mike talks about establishing trust first, that It could be just watching the roller coaster first to understand it better, to see others going through their experience before you do it, to hear other people's stories of deep meditation that they've experienced, or they've seen something, or a Kundalini effect. They've had this experience that this is something that could be expected to have of you. But then, if we take that fear and we think, oh my God, I've had this experience, I never want to see that again. I want to forget about it. So I'm just going to drink. I'm going to do other drugs. I'm going to do something else to just make me completely forget. And I think that's where we start getting lost. Just like Mike's friend needed to be put into psychiatric care. Jenny, I know that you've pulled a lot of people out of alcoholism and helped them get back onto a sober path. And that's where I think is identifying it when someone has gone it, and how do we actually catch that? How do we bring them back onto a safe path?
Yeah. And they have to want to do it too.
Yeah, that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Yes, I've heard the intention is critical. In addition to psychedelics, I know somebody's had some interesting experience with raw cacao as well, in a very controlled fashion, fermented. I think it's fermented as well, with a few other things. But yeah, there's a lot out there.
And then on the other side of the spectrum, I've heard also stories about like spiritual gurus that are at such a high level of vibration that they tell their students, or there's some story that my husband was sharing with me from a book or something, where this guru was saying, give me another one. It was like LSD. It was like, give me another hit. Give me another hit. And he took like all these hits of LSD and never took that before, and yet didn't affect him in any way.
Just like we were talking about before, it's once you've had that experience and you know what it's like, you can actually pull that experience in without actually having to take the substance. Yeah. It's just learning to bring your resonance into the vibration of, say, LSD or mushrooms, because there is nothing but a vibration. Yeah. So if we can change our vibration to the vibration of the substance, we don't actually need to ingest the substance to have that experience. Or, as you were saying, someone who's vibrating so high that they can actually vibrate well beyond the vibration of the substance.
Yeah, like I think it might have been Ram Dass or a story by him, but something like that. I'm not sure who that was.
I know when I was a teenager, we used to go to raves quite a bit, and these underground raves that you'd end up doing a lot of ecstasy, and you take the ecstasy, but after a while, it's just such a freeing, happy moment that you're open, you're loving, you're just sharing with everybody, and you're dancing. It was such a freeing moment for me that after that, I would just go to raves with nothing, and I wouldn't need anything, because I would just go into that state of being free and loving and carefree, and just in pure love. And that ended up being like my workout routines. I'd be out there for like 8 hours just dancing all night, and it was amazing. I love those experiences, and that was out the use of ecstasy, but I brought the experience in, just like Mike was saying.
Well, you were feeding off the vibe of everyone else. It's I'm curious if we ever danced beside each other and didn't know
it. I'm sure we did, because when I was doing raves, this was like the underground. It wasn't open. It wasn't public. You'd go see a guy in a corner. Okay, be at this corner, and someone would hand you the address. So that was probably, I'm sure we were there.
So there are other ways that we can achieve these altered states of consciousness. So sometimes a traumatic event can induce an altered state of consciousness, like a near-death experience or something like that. Or if you've been so emotionally hurt, it can shatter your reality and change how you view the world, right? So that is an altered state of consciousness, and it can really change the direction of everything in your life. There are even things like the sensory deprivation or the float tanks. I've yet to experience one myself, but I've heard amazing things about them and their ability to induce these altered states of awareness. Fasting is another great one. I know for my wife Sylvie and I, when we first got together, we actually didn't eat for 2 weeks, because when we got together, if you guys had watched last season when we talked about twin flames, I explained that story. But we had both gone through such a spiritual awakening, Kundalini awakening, when we first met, that we just survived off of that vibration and that altered state of being, and that love that, again, we didn't eat for about two or 3 weeks. And that fasting process also brought forward and created a lot of those experiences we were having. So a fast, even a 24-hour fast, can induce these altered states of awareness. Do any of you have experience with fasting?
I've experienced the float tank before, and that is very cool to get into one of those tanks. And you do definitely, if you're able to relax, come into that altered state of consciousness. I had forgotten.
Surrendering again, right?
It's been a little while since I've been in one, so I had forgotten about it.
Yeah,
It's a wonderful experience.
I know in my first float tank. So what a float tank is either a pod or a big pool, and it's full of magnesium. So it's essentially like taking a magnesium bath or Epsom salt bath. So it's so dense that you end up floating in it, and your ears end up just being covered by water, and they dim the lights in the space, or you're in complete darkness. And in those events, like it took, for me, it took about 30 minutes for my body to become comfortable. It was so stiff and hunched. I could feel my shoulders up to my ears because my body just would not relax. But after about 30 minutes, it finally relaxed. And when I did it more, I was able to go in. I knew what to expect, that my body was much more in a more comfortable state that took me into deeper states of unconsciousness in these experiences that we're talking about. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Let us know in the comments if you guys experience this as well.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions. If I could bring these up, if that's okay. Hoshna has got a lovely observation, and there's this bit at the end about, would you say this is an expanded awareness? What do you think, Mike?
I did a meditation. I think I've gone so deep in meditation because I noticed a change in color of the surroundings of what did I see. 2 ETs, and one of them noticed me, and I crapped myself and opened my eyes. Would you say this was expanded awareness?
Very much. So like I explained before with Rachel's story, the meditation was probably releasing your body's natural store of DMT, or dimethyltryptamine, which can create these hallucinogenic or altered states of awareness within ourselves. And whether it was ETs or whatever, that's how you experienced it. So it's not wrong in the way you experienced it, but I'm assuming it was probably your first time having an experience like that, which is probably why it scared you. And that's a lot of people when they go into a deep meditation. I hear it all the time. It's like, I was right there, and I was right there, and then I got scared, and whoosh, it just goes away. Yeah. So that's, again, that ability to just surrender into that experience can take you to those altered states.
Well, I also think it's important to note that you need to define your area as well. That when you do your meditations, that you set the definition that I only allow love inside my space. I only allow love to leave my space. Only those that have the highest and best intentions for the greatest good of all are allowed into my meditations to interact with me. That when you then go into those experiences, it isn't just freeing yourself and opening yourself into the complete unknown, that there are certain boundaries that you've set in place. And once you've defined them and you set them, you know that they're going to be honored. And for myself, I've entered into a habit of calling in Archangel Michael to be my spiritual bouncer. So, and it just happens to be one of the beings that I connect with. So be my spiritual bouncer and make sure you protect this area. And it gives me extra comfort so that when I go into these deep states, these deep meditations, I know that no matter what, I'm always in a high vibration. That even when somebody kind of brings in other lower vibrational elements that typically that bring fear into it, I'm not worried because I'm always in a high vibration because I set my boundaries.
Right.
So somebody has a comment or a question in the comments. I think it's Marnie. That is something that I wanted to bring up too, kind of about astral traveling, but I was even just wanting to talk just in general about the dream state and how that, because everything you're saying about not like surrendering, like not giving into the fear is exactly how the dreamscape works. Like when you're in control and you know your power, there is nothing that can scare you. And I actually had a dream last night like this, where my guides will teach me in my dream the powers that I have. And so when I get into a scary situation in my dream, I'll have, like last night happened to be the unicorns. They're like, Rachel, you can see us, but nobody else here can. I was trying to get out of this situation. It was tricky, and I was getting a little bit scared. Like, how do I get out of the situation? They showed up. There's like 4 of them, and the people around me couldn't see them, but I could see them, and I knew that. And they were telling me telepathically, they're like, use your cloak, use your invisible cloak. So I had this purple cloak that I had to visualize, that I didn't physically have, but I had to put it over me and just know that I'm invisible and nobody can see me. And then the first second I could just get out of the situation and go. And so I did, and that's what happened. And they didn't see me. And then I got out, and the unicorn came flying over, and I just rode off on the unicorn, which sounds really crazy, but hey, I connect with the elementals. But that's what I mean. Like, it's like all about not giving into the fear. Mm-hmm. I've had other dreams where I've known my power and something scary will come up to me and I'll just be like, oh, I've got the white light. Get out of here. So it's over time through your own spiritual practices. As you raise your vibration, you step into your sovereignty, you become more powerful. What that shows me is, hey, I'm doing something good in my real life to be able to like have dreams like that, where I know my power and I'm exercising my power in my dream state, regardless of what guides are helping me or not helping me. It's a good sign that you're on the right track when you're having dreams where you're able to do that. So the dream state is really representative of our own reality and how we have the ability to create our reality in the 3D too. So once we get good in that realm, we can really, good in this one, it works both ways, I think, but it is a good way to sort of have certain experiences, I guess.
And I've held that same comment when I do astral traveling. I also have that same boundary of only love. And it doesn't matter where I go into, because I'll tell you, once you start visiting certain beings that are not visually pleasing, but their energy is of love, the fear within your body and mind is going to come up. So again, setting those boundaries, especially when you're doing astral traveling, typically that is something that people want to do astral traveling, but their bodies and minds aren't ready to do astral traveling. Mm-hmm. There is a preparation period it comes to do. Just like Mike talked about establishing trust with the people that he does guided psychedelics for. He prepares their bodies, prepares them. So we need to go through preparation before doing astral traveling, because it can get pretty scary. Yeah.
Thanks, Jim. But I wanted to say, I think we should do a show maybe one day on astral traveling, because it is something I'm interested in learning more about. I don't intentionally do it, or I haven't tried to intentionally do it, because I know you have to be very, like, not in that fear-based state, like, to really go into that, or even Merkaba travel and time travel. There's a lot of stuff you can do, but interesting topic.
I've never sat down and tried to learn how to astral travel. It's just something I've always done naturally. It's to the point where my wife Sylvie had to recognize that. So she sometimes is the one that just kind of pulls me back into the body, because I get so lost out traveling the cosmos that I forget that I'm supposed to be here in the physical 3D world from time to time.
And if you guys want to try time travel as well, think about an event. This is really easy. That you can, if there's even a drawer within your house that you haven't looked in a while, set yourself go into meditation, go into the quietness, go into the stillness, and then look at going into this drawer and opening it up and seeing what's inside that you haven't seen it. Have your partner rearrange it and change it about. To look in that drawer, what's going to happen now? What are they going to do 2 hours from now? So I'm going to go into meditation now, and then once I'm done, go in there an hour or two from now, rearrange this drawer and put these items in here, and I'm going to see what I'm going to get. That it's not about being exact, just like our meditation practices, our mediumship practices. It's not about getting the right answer. It's about practicing. And you can do the same. I'm going to go to the grocery store. Who am I going to see? What are the people are going to cross? You can practice that and keep it within your area. And ultimately, it is a time trap. I mean, the government has been doing this for decades now in spying. This was like one of the first things they did in spying was using these mental aspects of it. It's documented, and there's scientific proof from the government of doing this. So yeah, it's really cool and easy to do. And like anything else that we know on an energetic level, all it takes is a practice. And you can do this. Everyone can do this.
So
I've got into the habit of whenever there's anything scary that pops up in my meditations, like everybody else, I was taught about protecting myself and sending it to the light. But now, especially when there's something scary, I just give it huge amounts of love. And if it's a low vibrational or relatively low vibrational being, they can't take it. They just, oh, it's enough, and then off they go. And one of the most surprising things that I do in my gratitude prayer, and I'm saying surprising because I don't normally do it, is I go through all the different moments and beings that I'm grateful for, and then I say, and I'm also grateful for the Orions, the reptilians, and the low vibrational entities out there, because I'm going to send them loads of love. And then I've invariably hear this little shriek saying no, because they can't take it, and it's just playing with it and being totally comfortable with it, and knowing that in our own, every one of us in our own divine self have that power to do that. And there's nothing so scary out there that we can't address and assess with love. And then after that, it just melts away because they can't take it. And they either love it or they don't. They can't handle it.
So, do you know why I'm posting it out there? Do you know why the reptilians are shrieking?
My understanding is that they can't. It's not because it's not within their vibrational match. And as we all ascend in our own way, there's a particular, I wouldn't say a particular point, but there's an understanding that actually protection is fine, and doing this, that, the other with the light is fine. But actually, because we are our own divine sovereign selves, we have to give permission for anything low vibrational to affect us. And obviously fear is a major window to allow them in. And so for me personally, it's just been just send them love, and inevitably that nothing happens, basically, because I know I'm automatically in that moment, in that time.
Yeah. So to share my my knowledge of the reptilians is that the reptilians have actually been, they're masters of dealing with their emotions. They've been able to devoid themselves of all elevated emotions, that they stay even keel. And it's why when you think you can create death and destruction and hurting and killing people, that it's so easy for them because they're void of emotion. They have no emotion about anything. So when we start connecting with them and giving them love, because most of us are operating in a vibration of love, we're raising our vibrations. And to do that, you do it with feeling. So we embrace our feeling, whereas they devoid their feeling. But there's also that lesson that they're masters of looking beyond the feeling. Because what you're going to find is that once you spend so much time in your meditations and feeling, you'll go to a point beyond that where you feel no feeling and there's just strict stillness. And that's when you start reaching a God point. So there's an interesting level that you start with maybe nothing, experience the feeling, but there'll be a part that you go beyond feeling as well.
Yeah, I've been told that I'm in my past essences or my past experiences, I was a sixth dimensional reptilian, and so when I first started meditating, I remember sketching, just freehand sketching, and I drew a reptilian. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I just knew it was so awful. I just would put the paper down and I just would look at it. Every time I looked at it, I had this horrible feeling. I would put it down. But lately, within the last year or two, I've been going back into my past lives, for want of a better word, and I was so shocked to know that I was a reptilian. Thinking, "Oh my goodness, what have I done now?" But we've all had these multiple lives. Where I know I've been a mass murderer about 3 lives ago when I was in an army, but that's history. That was then, and I had to learn something from it. So.
So you're
But you
moving
are
away from virtually. What are you hiding underneath that turban? I really want to know now. Is there's something
Well, I
up
mean,
there?
my last life I was Jewish, but I have to tell you, Karen, this is the thing that really shocked me. 3 lives ago, I was Muslim. My God, whatever happens? And that's when I went around slaughtering and killing loads of people. But that's another story. We won't generalize, shall we? Of course, the Catholics have done their own fair share.
I've had some clients that have coached, at least one for sure, have that experience. The more going into meditation, realizing that, oh, I was on that side of things and I was doing these things, and now I'm here to reconcile that. But there's no judgment with that. It's just healing, it's just healing work. It's just healing work on another level, on another dimension. So it's all the same work, and, recognizing yourself and that being is part of part of your healing work, what you're here to give back, I guess you could say, to the planet. And
Indeed. And all
the
of us
other
had these experiences.
reptilians out there that need that.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, we've all had these
before we left
experiences.
here, I did kind of want to share sort of some of the signs that you may have experienced an altered state of consciousness.
Yeah.
So as I go through this list, just like check with yourself. Have you experienced any of these things? So one of the main things is like a time distortion. And we talked about that with being in the zone. But time may seem like it speeds up, or it might slow right down. That's an altered state of consciousness.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is when you get really comfortable in these higher vibrations, you can consciously increase time or slow it down.
Yeah.
And the way that I do it, because I'm a very visual person, is I picture, if I want to speed time up, I picture an arrow pointing straight ahead of me, moving at a higher speed. If I want to slow time down, I turn that arrow around, point it backwards, and visualize it moving at a slower pace. And it's a great way, for me at least, to be able to adjust speed, because sometimes I'm in a situation I don't want to be in. So let's speed up time and get through this quickly. And if I'm in a
dominant Claire,
with that,
is that your dominant clairvoyance?
sight, sight and feeling. I have all my clairs are active, but they all come in at different times. For me, it actually depends on more who's around me and where they're at, especially when I'm in session.
Mhm.
But yes, vision has always been, and feeling has always been strong ones for me.
Interesting.
I think that's a very interesting observation about time, because quite often, I'm sure everyone in the house has had this thing, but when you're in the zone, or when you're meditating, or when you're playing an instrument, or whatever it is that takes you to that space, the time flies. You just do not know where it goes. The next thing you know, it's like 3 hours later. You think, wow, where's that gone?
Well, time is a construct, right? Time is something made up by man. It doesn't actually exist. So if we've made it up through our consciousness, why can't we control it through our consciousness?
Yeah,
True.
and then you add in that everything's happening in the now. So technically, everything's happening simultaneously. So we're talking a lot about past lives. I see another comment in there from Hushna about seeing some of her past lives through meditation. And technically speaking, they're all happening right now.
Right now, right beside you. And when you have those past life experiences, all you've done is taken the timeline of that experience and collapsed it into the current timeline you are in. And you're pulling these in and moving things out of your timeline. And we can do that through our thought.
And this really goes into expanding these altered states through our meditations, using psychedelics, that you are now affecting the work, that you can purposely work on all of your dimensions. So when you're releasing, I know we've done a lot of healing on releasing emotions from all timelines, personalities, and dimensions, that when you start releasing those emotions on a collective basis, you're now healing and fixing your entire timeline, your entire dimension, all your personalities. And that is definitely another part of expanded states of consciousness that you can do on purpose with a right guide.
I've had that experience with the time change, slowing down, speeding up, as I experienced it when I was going to be late for an appointment. and I'm starting to stress over getting to the appointment. And then I put that intention in of, okay, I'm going to have plenty of time. I'm actually going to have extra time before I even arrive there. And when I put that intention in there, that timeline shifts. I've felt it. I've had it happen a couple different times.
Yeah, I've had that happen with Metatron because he's like the record keeper and timekeeper and all of that. So I'll just ask him for help with that sometimes. But now I'm just getting this idea that I really need to do it Mike's way because I feel like I'd be more in tune with that energy myself. So
you need to find your own way of doing it with the information I shared.
Yeah,
that's how it works for you. It might not work that way for you, but you know it's possible now.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
And this all goes back into being more aware that you can be aware, just like Jenny, I'm aware I'm late and I have this feeling I'm going to be late and I'm not going to have enough time. Well, now I'm going to catch it. I'm going to stop it, or I'm going to transmute it into having a lot of time and that there's going to be extra time. And that's just part of this overall work of being aware of all your sensations, your vibrations, the feelings that are happening around you, so you can transmute it into something else. Which I kind of
fear too, right? You know, because if I'm in that worried I'm going to be late, I'm going to hold somebody up, I'm living in that fear, not that love vibration. So I'm dropping down into that lower vibration, and I can actually make it so that I'm resonating with that lower vibration that I end up being late.
Yeah, and it's the same spectrum. It's the same vibration, whether it's on the lower end or higher end, whether it has a label of fear or has a label of love. It's ultimately increasing your vibrations, which is what all this is about. Tapping into different vibrations, higher vibrations, which altered states are, in order to have an experience and be comfortable with it so that we can become familiar and change it and shift it. But what happens if you go into these higher states and you're lost? How do you come back? For your friends, like they get lost that had to go to a psych ward for 6 months, or someone that uses too much alcohol, how do we bring them back into reality?
Body work is one of the best things. So massage, any type of physical contact to help anchor them back into their physical body. Any type of grounding exercise, grounding meditations, grounding crystals are an amazing thing. Actually just had a client of mine had a full Kundalini awakening on the weekend and was having a lot of issues coming back into the body after a couple of days. So I had her reach out and grab some of her grounding crystals, and she kind of kicked herself in the ass for not thinking of that earlier, because it was an immediate brought her right back into the physical body while still being able to be in those higher states of awareness. Any type of energy work is a great way as well. But physical touch to me is a great way to bring people back into the physical body. And that's why it's important to have somebody there who you trust to be able to hold that space and to bring you back in.
Because I'd imagine if you're being touched by police, they're trying to restrain you and keep you from moving. It's a very different touch than receiving something of love and safety.
Correct.
Yeah. Wow, very cool. I love that. Love that. If you guys love that too, give us a like. We'd love to see that. That's really cool. I love that. Beautiful, man.
So there are just a couple more points because I know we're getting on in time here. But you might also experience like an altered sense of body. So you might feel totally disconnected from your physical body. And that's where that body work comes into play to help you reconnect. Or you might be like hyper focused on specific parts of your body. I know when I enter into altered states of consciousness, because I've learned how to relax and surrender into it, my body just starts flailing and moving in all types of different directions. I used to be embarrassed by it, but now that's just what happens as the energy is flowing through me. So I've had to learn how to just let my body unwind. Is the way I kind of look at it. It's moving through these different postures to help keep that energy flowing and keep that energy moving.
Is that movement fairly contained, or is it flailing? Like, do you find it dangerous that you're going to get hit in the head with a hand?
If you were close, you might.
Yeah.
And it happens, like when I teach classes, it happens in class, and it's people who've never done energy work before, and they're working on somebody, and all of a sudden the person's body starts to levitate off the table or move. And that's just the energy releasing. And sometimes it's the body needs to go through those motions to release the stored traumatic energy in the body. And the body needs to go through those motions as part of that release.
Love it.
Can I just draw your attention to so-called sects that were SECTS, just in case?
Yep.
So if you think of Quakers, if you think of Sufism, if you think of other sort of belief systems where people go into trances, where even in Kundalini as well, where there are movements, and it's sometimes seen as something other by others who can't understand it and frankly are often scared of it. I remember reading something about Joan of Arc going into a trance and having involuntary movements as well. And so throughout history, we've seen this being seen as a not orthodox way of going into religious sort of moments, purely because people don't understand what's going on, and perhaps we are just experiencing a little bit of what other people have in those moments as well. It's just part of the same, but it's often judged by others as being not appropriate or even scary.
It didn't start happening for me until I had my Kundalini awakening. And then ever since then, my body just, anytime I receive energy work or go into altered states of consciousness, my body does its thing.
Mine too, Mike. Yep.
Yeah.
So I know we already touched on this, but people might experience visual disturbances. So fractal shapes, other beings, whatever. You might see colors, swirls, patterns. You may see your past, like your memories play by. So that's an altered state of consciousness. The internal dialogue might quiet. So your monkey mind might quiet down. Your anxiety might disappear. The voices that are telling you to do things might disappear. That's always a blessing for a lot of people. You may also experience like age regression or progression. And this is something that happened with Sylvie and I in that first couple of weeks we were together, is we would look at each other and we would actually go through shape-shifting. And there was one evening where we were in a very high vibration together, just looking at each other. And her face, it was almost like a Rolodex, just kept shifting and changing, both masculine and feminine faces. And she was seeing the same thing happen to me. And it was, it's something that we were both familiar with, but it was definitely a trippy experience to see that. But I've seen people in altered states of consciousness where, a good friend of mine who I first witnessed it with, she had very feminine hands and they became very young masculine hands. I've seen her whole face and complexion and body change to that of a young teenage man, right? From a 50-year-old woman. So these can happen in altered states of consciousness. And I wasn't even in an altered state and I could see her shifting, but because she was in an altered state, it came into my reality. And I was in high enough vibration that I could witness that happening.
Jenny and I have that all the time, especially, she gave me a Reiki session, a remote Reiki session, which was amazing yesterday. But we've also been doing these meditations that I've been hosting, and our vibrations are really high right now. So anytime we get together, I just see the little girl that Jenny is, and just young, these with her big blonde curls and just child energy coming through all the time. And I think you experience something similar with me too. Like we're like two kids in a sandbox.
Yeah. We're like
together,
little brother and sister when we go into that meditation together. It's really cool. That's why we're sitting here grinning while he's talking. We're just kind of grinning about the experience yesterday. Was really cool. We were definitely both in altered state of consciousness yesterday. Yeah. It was amazing.
And I find that's what all this work is is that as we're raising our vibrations, as we're moving into 5D, that's a 5 dimension. We're moving into 5 dimension. And that is not that we're actually going to this place, but we're doing the work to physically change our mental body, our aspect body, everything around us, the space around us, the air around us. We are manipulating the vibrational elements all around us, the molecules, into a higher vibration, so that we're in this state all the time. So this is why we can always kind of go in and out of it at will, but we're actually in it all the time, and we're just feeling it and sensing that, oh, this is just how I am now. And being in that vibration of love is for me is the path that I find the greatest. That's the joy of this work. As crazy and woo woo as someone else might see us, it's such a bliss, and so grateful and thankful to be in this energy that, well, why wouldn't you? Because no drug or alcohol can ever attain this.
No, I've had some of the best highs I've ever had in meditation and bringing in that love energy than I ever had when I was using. So,
yeah. Well, even right now, how are you all feeling? I feel high.
I feel like, whoa!
Yeah. Right? And let us know in the audience if you're feeling anything as well. But there's a vibration that we're all feeling, that we're sharing here, that has no limitation of time or location, that people are going to watch this video again. They're going to feel this energy. They're going to be a part of it. But when you're part of it live, it's amazing.
That used to be me, Luz. That used to be me. Not anymore, though. I don't need it. It's amazing with the breath work and the meditation and the singing bowls and.
Yeah.
I wanted to just say something else to what Mike was saying about what you were talking about with your wife when you were looking at each other in the faces. But I've heard that, I've heard that you can do that with the mirror, like on your own. Like you can do like almost a meditation where you just stare really deeply into your own eyes and maybe have a candle there and allow that to come up, and you can see, some of your own maybe past life connections or whatever's coming through. But I've had that happen only in a dream, though. Like a couple guides or people that I know in my dreams, they kept changing into these other past life people, and I'm like, you're changing, you're shape shifting right now. It was just like spontaneous changing, and it was interesting. But yeah, it's really cool, all the different ways we can experience altered states of consciousness and how it can help us on our spiritual path. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, or anyone else has to add on that?
Well, just on the shape-shifting, it's I shape-shift all the time, and it happens so frequently that I can actually feel it happening. I can feel my face changing. And it's always interesting to have a client, well, you can see the chairs behind me, but when we're sitting face to face and talking, you can kind of see them trying to like focus in because they can sense something is different or something's changed about me, but they don't have that sort of conscious awareness that I've actually shapeshifted.
Yeah, and then there's like shamans who know how to do that and turn into animals, and there are practices that but you're at that level where it's you've tuned into how to do that. That's amazing.
I have to say, in some of my meditations, I've come across Kali Ma and Durga Ma, who are quite interesting, and even Lilith, actually, who are quite interesting characters in their own right. And in the very beginning, I was having difficulty with sphincter control. And when at first Kali Ma woke up in bed with me, which is very different. But having said that, after a while, if you can actually project love and just project love to them, they actually are really, really very, very nice beings. And even Lilith, who's got a bad press in certain schools of thought, is just brilliant because she's just such a fabulous feminist. And it's just lovely to see that energy and to understand and respect that energy. So there's no fear, no matter how interesting the other characters may look or they may appear to you, it's still love. And that's what we need to practice more and more, being non-judgmental and accepting what they are, and then just working with them if they want to work with us.
Yeah, everyone has something to teach us. All guides have something to teach us about ourselves, right? And about how to integrate all these parts of ourselves and aspects of ourselves into the whole, into the one. So
Indeed.
I feel like we're at a good place to wrap this up, unless there's anything else you wanted to add, Mike.
No, I'm good.
I think we covered so much in this episode. It's a really great talk. I think a lot of people are enjoying this session today. So please, if you are enjoying this session, join us in 2 weeks on Wednesday, February 15th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to talk about how to make your intuition your superpower. So we'll be discussing how intuition works and sharing our best tips for strengthening your connection with your intuition and your higher self. And we'll also be talking about the importance of discernment and the role that intuition plays in helping you recognize higher truths from distortions. So definitely check that out on our YouTube channels. And if you haven't subscribed to those channels, please do, so you can be notified when that is coming up. And I think that's it for today. I'm so happy you all joined us. We do have, let me just go in here real quick. One more thing we're going to add to this, that we have a couple episodes or shows that we can watch after this if you're interested in learning more about the sound healing and the altered states of consciousness. So there's some links at the end screen that we're going to add into the show to check out more on some of the sound healing Mike has. And what was that, Con? There was
Mike has a really good sound immersion with the didgeridoo, and we're going to stick that in the top corner here. And I actually have one on humming, which is a 15-minute hum meditation to increase your vibrations, and we'll put that on the lower side as well. So definitely check that out if you want to experience this personally.
Yeah, and everyone, we are sending you all so much love and light. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye now. Bye.